All right, this week we're going to be learning about a man named Martin Luther King Jr. And this is a picture of him. Some of the books we read are going to have real pictures of him. Some of the books we're going to read have little cartoon pictures of him. So this is what he really looks like. And Martin Luther King Jr., he's no longer alive, but when he was alive, he worked to change the laws. Now, when Martin Luther King Jr. was alive and when he was a little boy and even when he was a grown-up, there were special laws. They were called segregation laws. And the laws told people that they couldn't do things just because of the color of their skin. Okay, so Martin Luther King Jr., he was Black or African American, and he had dark skin, and when he was a little boy, he couldn't go certain places or do certain things just because his skin was not white or peach, like my skin is white or peach. And so he grew up thinking, that's not really fair. Just because my skin is darker, I can't play in the same parks as the white children. Just because my skin is darker, I can't go to the same restaurants as the white children. So Martin Luther King Jr., he grew up to be a preacher, which is somebody who speaks in the churches, but he also grew up to give lots of speeches and tell people of the world that this isn't fair. He had a dream that the world would be different, and he helped to make that dream come true. So we're going to read a lot about him this week. So this one that we're going to start is called Martin Luther King Jr. Now, he's not a king. King is just his last name. And it says Junior because his father had the same name as him. So if you have the same name as your father, you are a junior. Martin Luther King Jr. Today, people of all races celebrate Martin Luther King Jr. Day. But when Dr. King was a boy, he couldn't go to the same schools as the white children. So here's all the white kids. They're going into their school. Now Martin has to go to a different school only because his skin is a different color. That's the only reason. So that's not very fair. And usually the schools were not as good as the schools that the white children went to. So he's looking, he's wondering, why can't I go to that school? Why do I have to go all the way over here? He couldn't play in the same parks, and sometimes there were signs, whites only. So even though he was a little boy that liked to go to parks and liked to have fun and play with other kids, he couldn't go in there. Why? Only because of his skin color. He couldn't eat in the same restaurants. Whites only. What was the reason? Only because of his skin color. That is not fair, is it? He couldn't drink at the same water fountains as the white people. Whites, colored. They couldn't drink at the same water fountains. Why? Only because of the color of their skin and the segregation laws. So he's growing up looking at all this, seeing this, and realizing this is not fair. I don't like this. I want to change it. But his mother always told him, ML, which stands for Martin Luther, don't you ever forget that you are just as good as anybody. Young Martin believed that. He believed it so much that he grew up to teach that message to the world. So he wanted to grow up and he wanted to tell everyone in the world that was being treated unkind or unfairly, you are just as good as anyone. It says the same schools for everyone, jobs for everyone, voting rights. Dr. King said, you are just as good as anybody. And many people believed him. So right here, he's talking. It's called giving a speech. When you talk to lots of people. This is called the Washington Monument in Washington, D.C. And he's there and he's telling all the people there, you're just as good as anyone. Black people sat quietly at lunch counters just to show that they belonged there. So the people heard him. They heard his message and they said, if the only reason we can't go into restaurants or schools or movie theaters is because of the color of our skin, that needs to change. So Black people started going into restaurants and just sitting there. They weren't being violent. They weren't being dangerous. They were just sitting there to show the people we can belong here too. Now, some people didn't like that. Some people were angry. There's lots of angry faces. They refused to ride buses that made the Black people sit in the back. So normally on the buses, if you were a white person, you got to sit in the front of the bus. If you were a Black person, you had to go all the way to the back of the bus just because of the color of your skin. So the Black people said, we're not going to ride the buses anymore until we get to sit wherever we want. It was a long time that they didn't ride the buses. So the buses ran, they didn't get as much money because the Black people decided to walk instead. They walked alone into schools to prove that Black children had a right to learn beside white children. So Black children started going into the school. We can go to school here. It shouldn't matter what color our skin is. And because so many people believed Dr. King, at last, you know what happened? They changed the country's laws. So many people believed what he said, loved what he said, and he got the laws changed. Children of all races and colors get to learn in the same schools now. So Black children can go to school with white children. It's not a problem. Everybody can go to the same school. They play in the same parks. Anyone can go into any park. It doesn't matter what color your skin is. Everyone is welcome. They can sit wherever they like on buses. It doesn't matter what color your skin is. You can sit anywhere you want on the bus. They eat in the same restaurants. They drink in the same water fountains. Because of Martin Luther King Jr., children of all races now walk together as brothers and sisters. Now it's not separate. We don't have to be separated or segregated because of the color of our skin, and that's great. All right, so we're going to work on this today. Here we have a picture, and we have a word on our page today. This word says K-I-N-G. If I'm looking at his book right here, I see that word right here, K-I-N-G. What was that? What was that word? Martin Luther King Jr. So King is the word we're going to practice, and King is his last name, right? So before we start, I'm just going to cut off this bottom piece, and I'm going to save it because we're going to use it in a little bit. All right, so it says the first thing I do is always the same. Pick up my pencil, pen, marker, and I write my name. And then let's color Martin Luther King Jr. I'm going to give him a blue suit. What color suit are you going to give him? Oh, he's got a little, looks like he's got a little button or a little pin on there. I'm noticing in the book, he also had that little button or pin. It looks like it's white. I'm just gonna leave it white. I'm gonna give him a white shirt, and then I'm just gonna color his skin. I'm gonna use my brown crayon. And even though Martin did get the laws changed, people with black skin today still aren't treated as fairly all the time as white people are treated. And so that's why it's important we, as good people, have to always remember that we're going to treat everybody equally, right? So it says color the word. You can pick some colors. Maybe you can make it different colors. Or a pattern. You know how I feel about lots of colors. All right. So let's spell it together. How do we spell king? K-I-N-G. That's good that we did that, because the next part we're going to go on a hunt where we have to find the word king. There it is. K-I-N-G. 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 I think that's it. It's there 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times. Then the next part, we're just tracing it. K-I-N-G. 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 And then down below, we're going to write it. So let's use our pencil to write. I'm going to start all the way on the very, very left with my K. It's a capital K. K-I-N-G. And then I'm going to scoot over. I'm going to put a space there because I don't want it scrunched up with this word. And I'm going to do it again. K-I-N-G. I'm going to put another space. And I'm going to write it one more time. K-I-N-G. Then I'm going to use my piece that I had cut out. And I'm going to glue it in order. But I have to make sure I cut on all these dotted lines. And I throw away this little bit right here. I don't want those little pieces because it's like a puzzle. It has to fit perfect, just like a puzzle. So I'm going to stick my glue on. Ooh, that glue is really chunky. And I'm going to look how to spell it, K-I-N-G. So that tells me I'm going to start with my K first. K-I-N. And then G. Make sure you don't put glue any of your letters upside down because then it wouldn't say king, right? It would be upside down letters. All right. You can press pause if you need to finish, and that's all.